Last year, around this time, I was working on a video called Changing My Relationship with the iPad. In that video, I talked about how iPad progression felt like it had stalled, iPadOS was a letdown, and how I was going to be using a Mac going forward. Then iPadOS 26 came out, and that, well, just changed everything. I didn't rush to make a I was wrong video and throw my Mac out the window, but I quietly went back to using my iPad as my full-time computer. I didn't want to just make this big overarching statement on like, oh, the iPad is back and don't need the Mac and all that stuff. I just wanted to give it some time and kind of see how the dust settled with iPadOS 26 and app updates and things like that. And what I ultimately found was I still needed the Mac for a few things. There's some stuff that I got really used to when I was using the Mac for that period of time that I just didn't want to give up. This video is sponsored by Surfshark. Let's get into it. The Mac that I started off using when I made that video was the M4 Pro Mac Mini. It was a review unit from Apple. I've since sent that back, but now I am using an M4 Max MacBook Pro, the 16-inch model. I got this before iPadOS 26 came out, and I thought, I was like, this is it. I'm gonna go all in on one machine, and it was nice. Like, it's a really nice machine to have. However, I mostly use it at my studio's display, docked with the lid closed. Now, the extra screen real estate is useful for when I am working in laptop mode, but I don't do that often. It mostly stays at my desk. Knowing what I know now with iPadOS 26 and everything, if I was doing this all over, I would get a maxed out M4 Pro Mac Mini. Like, just go all in on that, make it as beefy as I can possibly be, and use that as just a main desktop Mac computer for the stuff that I'm gonna get to in just a minute. Having a desktop Mac can be really nice because there is a lot you can do with an always-on Mac when it comes to automation. Like, it's a really powerful device to have. Even if you were to get a simple baseline Mac Mini, there's a lot you can do with it knowing that it's always on. Plus, the balance of the power of a desktop Mac with the portability of an iPad just made sense for my workflow and the kind of things that I do. So if I was starting over, I would just get that Mac Mini, but I'm not right now gonna do that. But even with iPadOS 26 out, I still use the Mac for quite a few things. The most recent thing that I've added to my workflow is 3D printing and 3D modeling. I got the Bamboo Labs A1 3D printer, and this is a really nice 3D printer, and there's a lot you can do from it with an iPhone and an iPad. You don't actually need a Mac or a Windows computer in order to send print jobs to it. But if you want to create your own 3D models or modify some, having a Mac is really useful. Bamboo Labs has their own what's called a slicer, which is like a 3D modeling app with the ability to send it to 3D printers so you can do things like supports and stuff like that. This is called Bamboo Studio, and it's a pretty good app. Anything from their MakerWorld website can be opened up here, or you can open up any STL file in it and modify it. There's been a few things that I've modified already just so that I can resize them to fit the things that I need them to fit, and it's worked out pretty well. Now, when it comes to 3D modeling and printing, you can take a step up and go into Blender. Now, something really exciting is Blender is coming to the iPad in the future. I don't think there's a release date just yet. I am kind of curious how this will work with 3D printing. There is kind of a workflow to take like separate STL files and send them to a Bamboo Labs printer. Maybe I'll cover that in a future video, but for right now, all that stuff, I'm kind of like, if I'm modifying an STL file or creating an original 3D model, I'm doing that on the Mac right now. This video is sponsored by Surfshark. One thing I've been doing more is working outside of the house. This includes going to coffee shops during the day or working out of hotels while I'm traveling. And no matter where I am, I always make sure I have Surfshark installed on my Mac, my iPad, and my iPhone, all my devices I have with me. Surfshark is a VPN service that keeps you and your data safe. This isn't a, well, I have nothing to hide, so I have nothing to lose kind of things. At places like coffee shops or hotels or public places that have these open Wi-Fi networks, they can see your device's traffic traffic. And if their network is ever compromised, and trust me, they do get compromised, the people that get into those networks can see your traffic as well. And those scary people can do a lot with the information they get from this traffic. And this isn't just some marketing line. I used to work in IT. I had a really long career in IT, and this was something we put to the test, and it's absolutely true. With Surfshark's VPN, your traffic is routed through secure servers, so nobody gets access to that. And one of my favorite things about Surfshark is they don't keep logs. They use memory-only servers, so even they don't see what's going on. But having a VPN isn't just about security. It can be a handy tool for navigating the web. You can use it for checking price discriminations based on regions, and you can use it for streaming services to see what content they have in different regions as well. I use Surfshark whenever I'm away from home. Go to surfshark.com/lolly or use code lolly at checkout to get an extra 4 months of Surfshark VPN. My thanks to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. Another thing I'm using the Mac for is AI stuff, specifically Claude. Now, Claude does have a really good iPhone and iPad app, but there are some things you can only do on the Mac. I've been playing with the new co-work functionality. This is kind of a bridge between the regular Claude chatbot and Claude Code. This is kind of like sits in the middle here. And what's interesting about this is you can use this to control your computer. This is sandbox, so you have to give it permission to specific folders. Now, word of warning, when you're giving it permission to folders, it can modify and delete files in those folders. So be careful what you're doing this with and maybe have a backup. I've been using this to organize folders, especially old project folders that are just completely out of control because I didn't have a good organization system back then. Kind of like Hazel, but with natural language. So you can just point it at a folder and tell it, hey, there's a bunch of different files in here. I want you to sort them by file type. I want you to sort them by date. I want you to sort them by the kinds of stuff they are, or maybe the names. Whatever you can think of, whatever the metadata is there for that file, you can have it sort that. Now, another thing I'm doing with Cowork, and unfortunately I can't show you the actual output of this, but maybe I could do like a demo project or something. But I'm doing some client work right now, and I have a bunch of files for this client work. And I told Cowork to take a look at this folder with all those files in it. I want you to analyze those files and generate a PDF document based on the content in there, the types of stuff it is, and basically give me a bunch of graphs based on this stuff. And it handled it just fine. It did a great job, and it ended up being kind of like my summary page for this work. I am also using Claude Code for an upcoming project. I'm kind of rebuilding my website from the ground up. There's a bunch of things I want to do, and I'm using Claude Code for this. Now, Claude Code is on the iPad and it works fine, but if you really want the full power of it, like to be able to work with like IDEs and terminal and stuff like that, you really need to use it on the desktop. And then the last thing that I've been really impressed with Claude on the desktop for is MCP. MCP, in my opinion, is the future of automation. I actually wrote out a big segment of what this is for this script in this video, but I'm actually going to make a whole separate video about MCP because it got very complex and there's a lot to talk about here. But basically what MCP is, if I can just boil it down, is if you've seen those connectors in Claude, like the ability for it to go through your Gmail account or Google Calendar or connect up to like, a project management system or something like that. MCP is basically the bridge between those services and Claude. And I truly think it's the future of automation. The other big workflow I'm doing with the Mac is big creative projects. Now, the iPad has pro creative apps. It has DaVinci Resolve, Final Cut, Lightroom, Photoshop, all those big apps, Shaper 3D, all that stuff is there. But some things are, just get held back from the iPad, which is really unfortunate. So for bigger video projects, I'm still using Final Cut Pro for the Mac. I love Final Cut Pro for the iPad, but it's not feature parity with the Mac at all. It's not on the same level. The fact that it's still missing plugin support, which was something that was announced day one with the iPad version that Apple said would be coming soon, and we haven't heard a peep about that, is kind of a big letdown. I'm also using Lightroom and Photoshop on the Mac. Lightroom used to be like my golden child of like, hey, see, pro apps can exist on the iPad and they can be feature parity with the Mac. But then Adobe just kept updating the Mac version and not bringing all the features over to the iPad version, which is a huge bummer. Photoshop for the iPad is always kind of, I hate to say it, but it's always kind of been a joke. The fact that it doesn't even have the pen tool. Like, it's something I harp on so much, but it's like the perfect example of like a utility that is universal in Photoshop that everyone uses and would make so much sense on the iPad, but isn't there. But then there's platform exclusive apps to the Mac, and one of my favorites is an app called Hush, and you're actually hearing it right now. What Hush does is it cleans up audio. So I'm able to take the audio track for this video, drop it in there, it cleans up echoes, background noises, kind of just makes me sound a little bit better. It takes that just kind of echoey edge off that's hard to get rid of in raw video, and it does such a good job. I have never found anything that comes close to how this performs on the iPad. Final Cut has background audio cleanup tools. They don't sound anywhere near as good as Hush. I would love to get an app like Hush or Hush itself on the iPad, but I don't see that happening, unfortunately. So even when I do edit videos on the iPad, I always take my audio, run it through Hush on the Mac first, and then bring it over to the iPad. Then there's podcasting. So I have a podcast called Comfort Zone, link in the description below. You should really go check it out. And we use a service called Riverside to record this. And we use Riverside because we're both a video and an audio podcast. And Riverside does a really good job of handling the recording for everything. So the three of us join the call and I hit the record button and everything's just uploaded, and then I get nice high quality audio and decent-ish video from an output, and I'm able to edit all that together. Riverside, while they do have an iPad app, is a joke. It does not work well on the iPad. And to work through the web browser, it needs a Chromium browser, so Chrome, Edge, something like that. Those aren't on the iPad. Apple doesn't allow non-WebKit browsers in the US, which is really unfortunate. So it holds back my workflow from being completely on the iPad because I don't want to change from using Riverside. If we were to change from using Riverside to record our podcast, it would be so much more work for me. So the thing that's holding me back from being able to do this on the iPad is Apple. So I'm having to use the Mac to record our podcast. Now, there are a few utilities on the Mac that I absolutely love. These aren't things I need to use, but they're things that, like, hey, I'm using the Mac already, so I'm going to use these. The first is Raycast. Now, after I upgraded my Mac to Tahoe, I did try out the new Spotlight for about a week, and I ran back to Raycast. Raycast is just faster than Spotlight, and it has built-in stuff like a clipboard manager, snippet manager, actions and extensions, even an emoji picker. There's just so much more you can do with Raycast compared to Spotlight. Spotlight's getting there, but it's just not quite there yet. Like, it does have a clipboard manager, but the clipboard manager is limited to 8 hours, which is really unfortunate to me because sometimes I do want to pull up things that I copied a couple of days ago. Hyperkey is another thing. It's this idea of being able to combine Command, Option, Control, Shift into one modifier key, oftentimes the caps lock key. I set up Hyperkey through Raycast, but there are a ton of utilities on the Mac you can use, some that are literally specific to just doing this one thing, if that's all you want. But I use this for system-wide stuff like toggling the new task action in Todoist so that anywhere in macOS, I hit Hyperkey T and I'm able to just type out a new task. I also use it for window management, so I can hit Hyperkey right, left, up, down arrow to do different window management. I also combine it with the app Keyboard Maestro to combine commands together. For example, I use it with Final Cut. I can hit Hyperkey 1 in Final Cut, and what this does is it'll turn my clip into a slow-mo clip, and it'll turn on stabilization automatically for me. Then there's CleanShot X. I take a ton of screenshots and screen recordings, and while there is decent built-in utilities on macOS for this, CleanShot X it's elevated. It just goes to the next level. It has a really good utility for marking up screenshots, plus it has a ton of options for how it handles screen recordings and screenshots through management, where they're saved and stuff like that. So it just takes off that extra like 10-20% of like just things I need to do and just automatically saves them to a specific folder and stuff like that. And then there's Text Sniper. What Text Sniper does is it copies uncopyable text. Now, this is something you can actually do through CleanShot X as well, but I like Text Sniper because it handles keeping the formatting of the text for me. So My big use case for this is copying the markers out of Final Cut and using them as chapters in YouTube. That is unselectable text, you can't do this. So I will hit Command-Shift-2, which enables Text Sniper, copy that, and then paste it into drafts where I will put it in YouTube later. If I did that with CleanShot X, it doesn't keep that formatting for me. It puts everything in one line, so it's just a little bit of extra work. Now, technically, you can do this with the built-in screenshot utility, but you have to take a screenshot, then go in and copy the text and stuff like that. It's just easier to hit Command-Shift-2, select the area, and then the text is added to your clipboard. Supercharge is an app that adds a ton, and I do mean a ton of tweaks to macOS. Stuff like adding cut to Finder, move files to the trash when you hit the delete key, create a new text file with a keyboard shortcut in Finder, auto adjust the column width. Plus, it adds system keyboard shortcuts like ejecting external drives, clearing out notifications, and opening the passwords menu bar utility. A lot of these I use the hyperkey with to trigger. And there's just so much in this app that you can use to tweak macOS. I guarantee you everyone watching this video could probably find about at least 5 things that they would want to enable in Supercharge. Then there's Hazel. I use this to manage folders and project files, like finished files. So what I'll do is I have a couple of folders called finished videos, finished thumbnails, and when I'm done with videos and thumbnails, I'll put them in these respective folders. And what Hazel does is it watches those folders, and when my Mac connects to the NAS next, it will automatically move those files over to my NAS and archive them. So this way I don't have to remember to archive them. I just put them in the folder that's in my video projects folder, and then it just takes care of it automatically for me. It's just a really nice utility. I also use this for managing like my photo folder library and stuff like that as well. And then the last thing I want to mention isn't even a third-party app, but it's Tahoe's new menu bar utility. I really love what they did with Tahoe's menu bar. You now have the ability to hide menu bar items, something I used to use Bartender for, but ever since it was sold and Tahoe came out, it's been really buggy. So I uninstalled Bartender and I'm just using the built-in Tahoe menu bar utility now. And I can just go in and turn stuff off like the Adobe stuff. So this way I just have just the stuff that I want in the menu bar. Plus, I really like that it shows live activities from your iPhone. Like I said, I've been doing a lot of 3D printing, and the Bamboo Handy app on my iPhone has live activity support. So I can see the progress of my 3D print job right there in the menu bar. In 2026, the iPad is my main computer. When I sit down to work, that's the computer I'm grabbing. But like I've said throughout this video, I still need the Mac for a few things. And I think a lot of people that watch my channel that use the iPad probably also use the Mac as well. So I'm hoping the stuff that I mentioned in here is still useful. And for me, the iPad and the Mac can work together. It doesn't need to be an either-or thing. They can work together. For example, when I'm looking for new apps and stuff like that, I look for stuff that's universal. That's both on the iPhone, iPad, and the Mac. Also, when I'm working at my desk, I keep my iPad on the MagFlow Pro stand right next to my studio display, and I will use universal control to work on both devices at once. It's really nice. Now there is Sidecar, where you could just use the iPad as basically a second display for your Mac. I don't like that as much. I'd rather just use universal control because I'm using universal apps and stuff like that. You get the more native resolution of the iPad. You get like, everything just feels a little bit smoother that way. But I want to hear from you all. If you use a Mac and an iPad, if you work from both, how do you use the two together? What do you use the Mac for? What do you use the iPad for? Let me know in the comments below. My thanks to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. If you liked the video, hit the thumbs up button, subscribe if you haven't already, and have a great day.